I was sitting at a dinner party last week when the conversation shifted to a new citywide policy. One of my friends, someone usually known for his level-headedness, suddenly leaned across the table, his voice dropping an octave. "The entire system is a rotting corpse," he said, eyes fixed and intense. "You don't fix a corpse, you bury it and build something entirely new." He wasn't just talking about the policy anymore, he was calling for a total revolution, a complete erasure of the status quo. Across from him sat another friend, an architect who had spent years working within city council committees. She looked genuinely hurt, almost as if she'd been physically struck. "We have the foundation," she countered, her voice trembling slightly. "We just need to renovate, to reform the parts that aren't working." What followed wasn't a debate, it was an execution of a friendship. Within 10 minutes, the radical saw the reformer as a coward and a traitor. The reformer saw the radical as a dangerous arsonist. But then the most fascinating thing happened. A third person, someone who rarely speaks up and usually prefers things to stay exactly as they are, chimed in. He didn't offer a new plan. He simply said, "Maybe we should look at how we did things 30 years ago. That actually worked." In that one moment, the table became a living, breathing political spectrum. You could practically see the invisible lines being drawn. There was the radical on the far left, desperate to burn the map, the reformer in the center left, caught in the split trap of trying to find a middle ground only to be attacked by her own allies, and the reactionary on the right, looking through a rearview mirror at a golden age he believed we'd lost. We throw these terms around every day, conservative, liberal, far right, as if they are static labels we're born with. But the truth is much more fluid. It's not necessarily about specific policies, it's about your fundamental relationship with change. Are you trying to drive the car toward a future utopia, or are you desperately slamming on the brakes because you think we've already gone too far? To understand why our online discussions turn into such bitter battlegrounds, we have to stop looking at the insults and start looking at the political spectrum itself.
It is visceral, isn't it? The way you describe that table.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a policy disagreement at all. It sounds biological.
It felt biological. That's the perfect word for it.
Like different species trying to share a habitat that's suddenly, become way too small for everyone.
It really felt like fight or flight. And honestly, it left me wondering for days, what were they actually arguing about? Because on the surface, it was about a zoning policy or something just as mundane.
Right.
But the emotion attached to it, the language, rotting corpse, golden age. It felt like they were arguing about the nature of reality itself.
And that's because they were. I mean, they really were. And this is where we really need to slow down and properly dig into the sources we have today. We've got a whole stack of material here. It ranges from, 19th century sociology all the way to some really cutting-edge papers on AI and political psychology.
It's quite a range.
It is. And if we synthesize them, if we pull the thread through all of them, they suggest that the spectrum that we're all used to, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, is actually a very poor map for what happened at your dinner party.
But it's the standard map, though. It's the one we all use every day. We think, okay, left means big government, right means small government. Or, left means progress, right means tradition. Simple.
Sure, and that's what we could call the policy spectrum. But the sources we're looking at today suggest that it's outdated. What played out at your dinner party, what's playing out everywhere, is what one of our sources calls a temporal spectrum.
The temporal spectrum. Okay.
It wasn't about tax rates. It was about the arrow of time.
Right.
It was about when these people fundamentally want to live.
When they want to live. You mean literally like past versus future.
Exactly. Let's start with your radical friend, the one who called the system a rotting corpse. I mean, that image is incredibly specific, isn't it?
Yeah, he was intense. He had this look in his eye. He wasn't interested in fixing the pothole. He wanted to tear up the entire road.
Because to him, the present is irredeemable. It is dead matter, a corpse. His orientation is entirely toward a future that doesn't exist yet.
A future he's imagining.
Precisely. He's a futurist in the most aggressive sense of the word. In political theory, the radical is someone who believes the current structure is so poisoned, so fundamentally corrupt, that the only moral act is to uproot it, destroy it.
So destroying the present is actually a moral good for him.
Yes, because it accelerates the arrival of that better future. He's willing to burn down the village to save it, so to speak.
Okay, I can see that. He's stepping on the gas pedal, just flooring it, and he's trying to crash through the wall in front of us to get to whatever's on the other side.
A perfect analogy.
So if he's flooring it, then the reactionary, the guy who wants to go back 30 years, he's the one slamming on the brakes.
No, and this is a really crucial distinction that the sources make. It's one that gets lost in all the shouting matches online. A conservative slams on the brakes.
Oh, okay.
A conservative wants to slow down or stop change. They want to preserve the status quo. But a reactionary wants to put the car in reverse.
Reverse. Go backwards.
They believe the destination isn't ahead of us, it's behind us. They're looking backward to a golden age.
And whether that age was actually golden or not.
It's completely irrelevant. To them, the timeline we are on is a degeneration. Every year that passes, every new policy, we just get worse. So the only logical goal is to return, to go back.
But that's the thing, the golden age he was talking about 30 years ago, I mean, I was there, I remember it. It wasn't perfect. It had huge, massive problems. It was not some utopia.
And to the reactionary, the factual reality of the past matters less than the myth of the past. It represents order. It represents a time when things made sense to them.
When the map matched their territory.
Exactly. And this is where your poor friend in the middle, the reformer, gets absolutely crushed.
She was the only one talking about actual solutions. Let's renovate. Let's fix the specific parts that are broken. And they both just hated her for it.
Because she's the only one trying to live in the present. And in a polarized environment, the present is the battlefield. It's no man's land.
So they see her as an enemy.
To the radical, she's propping up a corpse. She's a collaborator with an evil system. She's putting bandages on a dead body.
And the reactionary.
To the reactionary, she's just managing a decline. She's shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. She's accepting the flawed present instead of trying to return to the perfect past.
So the center isn't collapsing because people don't like moderate policies.
No. The sources suggest it's collapsing because we can no longer agree on when we want to live. We have a fundamental disagreement about the direction of time itself.
Wow. That makes the anger make sense. The sheer vitriol. If I think you're trying to trap me in a burning building and you think I'm trying to drive us all off a cliff, we aren't going to have a polite debate about zoning laws.
Precisely. But here's where we need to go deeper. The question is, why now? Why is this split happening so violently right at this moment? The sources point to a concept called structural anomie. And to really get our heads around it, we have to look at the first story in our stack.
Right. And this is the story of Elias. I want to spend a moment on this one because while Elias is, a character in a sociological case study, he feels like a lot of people I know. He feels very real.
Walk us through his story.
Okay, so imagine a man named Elias. He's a librarian and he has been for 30 years. He lives in a town that for most of his life felt cohesive. Not perfect, but cohesive.
There was a shared understanding.
Yes. And the library wasn't just a place for books. It was a sanctuary. It was the center. People of all stripes, all political beliefs came in, followed the rules, whispered when they were supposed to whisper. It had a certain gravity.
But that started to change.
It did. Over the last decade, Elias watched his workplace shift from that community sanctuary to a battlefield. The status quo he had lived in his entire life began to crumble right in front of his eyes.
How did that play out?
Well, the radical faction in his town started protesting the library, saying it upheld colonial structures and needed to be, quote, deconstructed and dismantled.
The rotting corpse again.
Exactly. At the same time, the reactionary faction started attacking the library from the other side, claiming it was pushing a degenerate progressive agenda on children.
So he was caught in the crossfire.
Completely. And the story paints this picture of him sitting alone in the big, empty reading room. He's watching his two oldest friends, people he's known for decades, screaming at each other on the front steps, right outside the glass doors. One wants a revolution, one wants the golden age. And Elias, the key thing is, he isn't angry. He feels this profound, hollow loneliness. The source describes it as anomie.
And that word anomie, it's so important. We hear it in Sociology 101, and it's usually translated as normlessness, just a lack of rules. But that definition is way too sterile for what Elias is feeling. It doesn't capture the pain of it.
It sounds like a medical condition. I have a bad case of anomie.
In a way, it is. Emile Durkheim, the French sociologist who really popularized the term in the late 19th century, he didn't just see it as normlessness. He described it as derangement, or even more poetically, the malady of the infinite.
The malady of the infinite. That sounds poetic, but also genuinely terrifying. What does he mean by that?
Well, Durkheim argued that human desire is naturally insatiable. It's like a gas. It expands to fill whatever container it's in. If you don't have a container, social rules, clear limits, a shared definition of enough, you are tormented by endless possibility. You're constantly asking, why not more? Why not different? Why can't I have that? It's a kind of psychological torture.
So limits actually make us happy. That goes against everything our modern culture tells us. We're constantly told the sky is the limit, no boundaries. You can be anything you want to be.
And that very message, according to Durkheim, is exactly how you generate mass anomie. He believed that society's primary role was to be that container, to provide the limits that give our lives shape and meaning.
And he had a theory for how that container works, right?
Yes. Durkheim distinguished between two types of glue or solidarity that holds society together. In the old world, think of Elias's grandfather, maybe living in a small homogeneous village. You had what he called mechanical solidarity.
Mechanical, like a machine, like gears in a clock.
Exactly like gears in a clock. Mechanical in the sense of uniformity. Everyone was similar. There was a low division of labor. You were a farmer, your neighbor was a farmer, you shared the same religion, the same culture, the same daily rhythm. The social glue is sameness. You understood your neighbor because, in a fundamental way, you were your neighbor.
Okay, but we obviously don't live in that world anymore. We live in massive, complex, diverse societies. I don't want to be identical to my neighbor. I like that my neighbor is a software engineer and I'm not.
Exactly. And Durkheim saw this. He said we shifted to organic solidarity. And this is based on difference and interdependence. Think of a biological body, an organism.
The heart and the liver.
The heart is nothing like the liver. The brain is nothing like the stomach. They are totally different organs with completely different functions. But they absolutely rely on each other to survive. I can't build my own house, so I need a builder. The builder can't perform her own surgery, so she needs a doctor. We're all connected through our differences.
That sounds stronger, actually. A web seems stronger than a simple chain.
It should be. In theory, organic solidarity allows for incredible freedom and individuality while keeping us all connected in this complex web. But Durkheim's great warning was that anomie happens when this organic solidarity malfunctions.
When the web starts to break.
Yes. When the parts of the social body stop communicating. When the liver doesn't know what the heart is doing, or worse, starts to view the heart as a threat, as an enemy.
So the social glue dries up.
It dries up and cracks. The organs become isolated. They start to work against each other. And Elias, sitting in that library, is like an organ in a body that is failing. The radical and the reactionary are no longer communicating. They're attacking the organism itself. And Elias feels that derangement because the social reality he sees no longer matches his internal standards. He's a librarian in a world that no longer values the library as a sacred, shared space.
So he's a puzzle piece that no longer fits the puzzle. The puzzle itself has been smashed.
Precisely. And this gets even worse when we bring in Robert Merton. He was an American sociologist writing in the 1930s who took Durkheim's idea and gave it a very American update. He said anomie isn't just about glue. It's about a fundamental disconnect between a society's culture and its structure.
Okay, let's unpack that. Culture versus structure.
Think of culture as the goals that society tells you that you should want, the things we're all supposed to strive for. In America, for example, the primary cultural goal is the American dream, right?
Right. Vast wealth, success, the big house, the winner-take-all status. That is the target.
That's the target. The structure refers to the institutional means to get there, the legitimate pathways. So hard work, getting an education, playing by the rules, climbing the corporate ladder.
The official rule book. Work hard and you'll get ahead. That's the promise we're all sold.
That's the promise. But Merton argued that anomie occurs when the culture screams, get rich, win. But the structure whispers, sorry, you can't.
Ah, I see. So the game is rigged. The rules that they give you don't actually lead to the prize they show you.
Exactly. When there's a disconnect between the cultural goals and the institutional means, think about the gig economy today. The culture says, be an entrepreneur, be your own boss, innovate, get wealthy. That's the cultural message.
But the structure?
The structure says, drive this car for 12 hours a day for below minimum wage with no benefits and no path for advancement. When that disconnect becomes too vast, when people realize the rules don't lead to the rewards, they stop following the rules.
The social contract is broken.
It's not just broken, it's seen as a fraud. And this, according to the sources, leads directly to what they call modern political anomie. The state, the government, used to be seen as a moral regulator, a sort of collective superego that kept our economic appetites in check. It set the rules of the game.
It said, yes, make money, but play fair.
Right. Don't cheat your customers. Don't poison the river. Pay your taxes. But the thesis in our sources suggests the state has shifted its role. It's no longer the moral regulator. It has become a tool of the economy.
So instead of the government telling the economy, play nice, the economy is now telling the government, get out of the way.
Or even better, help me win. And when the government fails to regulate economic life, when it's seen as just another player in the game, the will of the people, which can be chaotic, selfish, and egoistic, overwhelms the state. The result is what the source calls pseudo-democracies.
Pseudo-democracies?
Characterized by stormy changes, constant instability, a lack of trust in institutions. Elias feels lost because the institution he served, the library, was supposed to be a moral anchor. It was outside the market. But in a world of pseudo-democracy and total economic obsession, a library is just a building that isn't generating revenue. It loses its sacredness. It becomes just another piece of real estate to fight over.
And when you lose the sacredness of institutions, when the outside world feels like a rigged game or a rotting corpse, I mean, where do you go? There's nowhere left to go but inside. You turn inward.
Which brings us to the second major theme of this deep dive. If Elias represents the pain of the external collapse, our next story represents the attempt to fix it internally, often through therapy.
Now, I want to pause on this next story because when I first read it, my immediate reaction was defensive. I go to therapy. I think mental health is hugely important. So when I see a critique of therapy culture, I get a little skeptical. But let's look at the story of Sarah.
Sarah is a compelling case because she isn't anti-therapy at all. She's a victim of its misuse, of its misapplication.
Right. So Sarah is a young architect. She works in a high-pressure firm in a major metropolis. She's brilliant. She loves her job. And she spent years mastering the technical side of things, you know, load-bearing walls, tensile strength, safety codes, the hard math of it.
The objective reality of the profession.
Exactly. But she noticed a shift in her firm. A slow but steady move from what she called a culture of merit to a culture of validation.
And what does that look like in practice in an architecture firm?
Well, she describes these design review meetings. A junior architect would present a project, and it would have a clear, objective structural flaw. Maybe the beam wasn't strong enough for the span, a solvable technical problem.
In the old culture, what would have happened?
In the old culture, a senior architect would have said, this is wrong, the math doesn't work, fix it. Direct, clear, focused on the work. But in the new culture, the feedback became about emotional harmony.
Emotional harmony in a discussion about a load-bearing wall.
Yes. Critics were worried that a harsh critique would damage the designer's self-esteem, that it would be unsafe. So the critique was either buried in these compliment sandwiches or increasingly just ignored altogether.
And the result of that?
A slow, creeping decay in quality. Work that was objectively worse, less innovative, sometimes even less safe, but subjectively safer for the ego of the designer. Sarah eventually left the firm because she felt the institution was rotting from within. She said it was like the therapeutic state had taken over the office and the prime directive was no longer to build great buildings, but to make sure no one's feelings got hurt.
This aligns perfectly, almost frighteningly so, with Christopher Lasch's work from the 1970s, The Culture of Narcissism. Now, we have to be very, very careful here. When Lasch uses the word narcissism, he doesn't just mean vanity. He doesn't mean the guy at the gym kissing his biceps in the mirror.
Right, it's not just about thinking you're great. It's not arrogance.
No, in fact, Lasch argues it's almost the opposite. Pathological narcissism, in a cultural sense, is defined by a weak self. A self that has no internal foundation, no core.
A weak self, how does that work?
Well, if you have a strong, integrated sense of self, you can handle critique. A critique of your work is not a critique of your soul. You know who you are. But if you have a weak, fragile self, you require constant, unending validation from the outside just to feel real. You need the likes, you need the praise, you need everyone to agree with you.
Because any criticism feels like an existential threat.
It feels like annihilation. And Lasch has this incredible line, pathology represents a heightened version of normality. He's saying the narcissist isn't an outlier. He's the poster child for the direction the whole culture is heading. What Sarah is experiencing is the intrusion of the therapeutic state into the professional world.
The therapeutic state? That sounds like a contradiction in terms. A state is supposed to be bureaucratic and cold. Therapy is personal and warm.
And that fusion is exactly the problem. The therapeutic state is the idea that nothing falls outside the province of health and medicine. Social problems, political disagreements, professional critiques about architecture, they all get reframed as medical or psychological issues that need to be treated.
So if I tell you your blueprint is wrong, I'm not just correcting your math, I'm attacking your mental health. I'm creating an unsafe space.
Exactly. This is what the philosopher Ivan Illich called medicalization. And Illich had a very provocative concept that's key here. It's called iatrogenesis.
Iatrogenesis, that's a $5 word. Break that down for us.
It's a term from medicine. It literally means brought forth by the healer. It refers to when the cure is what causes the harm.
Like getting a staph infection at the hospital while being treated for something else?
Precisely. But Illich applied it socially. He argued that when you medicalize normal life, you create social iatrogenesis. By framing Sarah's architectural critiques as matters of self-esteem or emotional harmony, the firm is actually weakening its employees. It is making them professionally sick.
How so?
They are denying them the resilience that comes from mastering a difficult craft. Instead of the standard being objective excellence, does the building stand up? The standard becomes subjective feeling, do I feel validated? The cure, protecting feelings, causes the disease, professional incompetence and institutional decay.
And we have a much more recent source here from Scott Galloway that calls this the cult of therapy. He argues that this obsession with the inner self is actually a massive, dangerous misdirection.
Galloway is absolutely brutal on this point. He argues, first, that we've turned therapy into a luxury good. He calls it a Birkin bag for feelings, a status symbol.
I can see that.
But more importantly, he says that focusing relentlessly on internal trauma distracts us from external economic realities.
This goes right back to Merton, doesn't it? The structure versus the culture.
It's a perfect match.
Yeah.
If you are deeply unhappy because you can't afford rent, because your wages have stagnated, because you have no job security, that's a problem with the structure.
Yeah.
But if society tells you your unhappiness is because you have unresolved childhood trauma or you haven't done the work, that's a cultural explanation that blames you, the individual.
You're being gaslit by the entire system. You're being told to fix an economic problem with a psychological tool.
And it's a brilliant strategy for maintaining the status quo, isn't it? Because meanwhile, the people who control the structure get richer, and the rest of us are all sitting around journaling about our boundaries.
Right. And Galloway points to the explosion of therapy speak in everyday life. Words like boundaries, gaslighting, toxic, holding space. These are clinical terms that have been hijacked for everyday conflict.
They've escaped the lab.
Completely. I see this everywhere. If you disagree with someone's opinion online, you're gaslighting them. If you don't want to do a favor for a friend, you're setting a healthy boundary.
Right. And while these concepts certainly have real value in a clinical setting with a trained professional, Galloway warns that their overuse in daily life is a disaster. He says, the language of suffering finds its way into the mouths of those who suffer least.
Wow.
It creates a comfort industry that ultimately makes society more fragile, not more resilient. If every conflict is a trauma, if every disagreement is a form of violence, then we lose the ability to have the robust, difficult, sometimes uncomfortable debates that a healthy democracy and a healthy architecture firm absolutely requires. Sarah had to leave her firm because it was decaying. It had started to prioritize the comfort of the architects over the integrity of the architecture.
It's so interesting to compare this to the Nordic model that's mentioned in the source material. In the US, the model is deeply individualistic. You go into a room by yourself and you fix yourself with a therapist.
You fix your soccer.
Exactly. But in the Nordic countries, the model is much more about social safety nets and community cohesion. They trying to fix the hardware?
It's the difference between treating the symptom in the individual and treating the unhealthy environment that's making everyone sick. And this connects right back to our intro. The reformer, the political center, is collapsing because the very institutions that used to uphold objective standards, like Sarah's firm or Elias's library, are dissolving into this soup of therapeutic subjectivity.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just happened because of psychology or sociology. There is a massive technological accelerant pouring gasoline on this fire.
That's right. We've talked about the loss of the social glue, the anomie. We've talked about the turn inward, the culture of narcissism. But we are doing all of this while holding supercomputers in our pockets. And our next source paints a pretty dystopian picture of what that technology is doing to our ability to think.
This is from a paper on cognitive castes. It's a heavy one. It argues that society is splitting, bifurcating into two distinct epistemic classes. And these are classes based on how we process knowledge.
Epistemic. That refers to epistemology, the theory of knowledge. It's about how we know what we know.
So this isn't about rich versus poor anymore. It's about how we think.
Yes. The paper argues that we are splitting. On one side, you have what it calls the rational elite. These are the people who use AI and complex information systems recursively.
Recursively, what does that mean in this context?
It means they use the technology as a tool for thought. They are in a dialogue with it. They interrogate the system. They ask an AI a question. They challenge the answer. They refine their query. They check its sources. They maintain what the paper calls epistemic sovereignty.
Epistemic sovereignty. I like that phrase. They're the captains of their own minds, the masters of their own information stream. Right?
Exactly. They are the masters of the tool. But on the other side, you have the passive consumer. And the paper argues this is and will be the vast majority of people. These are the people who are pacified by engagement-optimized interfaces.
Pacified. Wow.
They don't think. They download propositions.
Download propositions. That is a chilling phrase. It sounds like something straight out of the Matrix. Or like we're just biological hard drives being written onto by an algorithm.
That's the core of the argument. It's a new form of servitude. The paper calls it informational serfdom.
Serfdom. Like feudal peasants who work land they didn't own.
Exactly. An informational serf lives in a mental reality they don't own and didn't build. The paper argues that for the passive consumer, consent is no longer coerced, like in old-school propaganda. It is engineered.
Engineered how?
Through millions of micro-adjustments in attention. The algorithm notices your dwell time on an image, your subtle cursor movements, maybe even your pupil dilation through your phone's camera. And it nudges you. It slowly, imperceptibly guides you toward a belief. You think you formed a strong opinion about the rotting corpse or the golden age, but really you've just consumed a prepackaged reality as a service.
This is making me deeply uncomfortable. I have to ask myself, am I a serf? How would you even know?
Well, the paper suggests a simple test. Can you explain the opposing view coherently and charitably? Or does the opposing view just look like pure insanity, evil, or stupidity to you?
If the other side just looks like monsters or idiots,
then you might be trapped in an information feed designed to make you think that.
And this just completely destroys the entire idea of deliberative democracy, doesn't it? I mean, the whole concept of democracy assumes we are all rational agents looking at a shared set of facts and debating them.
It absolutely assumes a shared reality. But AI-mediated feeds create what the source calls neo-feudal informational economies. If my feed is constantly confirming my bias that the system is a rotting corpse, and your feed is constantly confirming your belief in a lost golden age, we aren't just disagreeing anymore. We are inhabiting mutually unintelligible cognitive worlds.
We are reporting from different planets.
The source calls this epistemic Babel, a digital Tower of Babel.
Epistemic Babel. That explains the dinner party. It explains the sheer violence of it, the inability to connect.
It explains why they couldn't find a single inch of common ground. The radical, the reformer, and the reactionary weren't just arguing about policy. They were literally speaking different languages, downloaded from different algorithmic realities. They lacked the infrastructure to form autonomous judgments. They're relying on belief as a surface.
So when you combine Elias's anomie, that feeling of normlessness, the loss of the social glue,
with Sarah's narcissism, the retreat into the self, the demand for validation over truth.
and then you pour this technological fragmentation on top of it, you get a perfect storm. The center cannot hold because there is no shared ground left to stand on. The ground itself has been fractured into a million little pieces.
It's a truly terrifying picture. We have dissolved the glue that held us together. We've retreated into the fragile self, and now we have outsourced our thinking to machines that profit from our division.
It feels incredibly bleak. I'm sitting here thinking, is there any way out? Is there any path back from this? Or are we just doomed to scream at each other from our separate digital realities until the lights go out?
It's a dark diagnosis.
But we do have one more story. And this one. It might offer a glimmer of, well, maybe not hope, but at least a different path, a different way of thinking about the problem.
This is the story of Arthur.
Right. Arthur. I heard about this through a local community blog, a very small-scale story. Arthur is an elderly man living in a suburb that has seen massive change over the last few decades. It used to be a tight-knit, working-class area where everyone knew each other.
A place with high social capital.
Exactly. But over 20 years, the demographics shifted, people moved in and out much more frequently, the local factory closed, and the organic social ties, the unwritten rules of who mows the shared strip of grass, who watches the kids at the bus stop, they had just evaporated.
The Gemeinschaft had died.
Yes, and we'll get to that term in a second. But practically, what Arthur saw was people living behind tall fences, atomized, suspicious of one another. He wasn't a reactionary. He didn't want to go back to some segregated past. But he missed simply knowing his neighbor's name.
He missed the connection.
He missed the connection. So he did something very small, very practical. He started a tool library in his garage.
A tool library. Tell me more.
Yeah. He gathered up all his tools, drills, saws, lawnmowers, hedge trimmers, and he put a sign out and posted on the neighborhood forum. He said, "You can borrow these for free, but there are rules. You have to sign them out in this ledger, you've had to return them clean, and if you break it, you fix it or replace it." He called it, quite grandly, a clinical restoration of civilizational standards.
That sounds incredibly grand for a lawnmower rental service.
It does, and he faced resistance. Some neighbors thought it was weird, controlling. Some younger residents thought his talk of standards was some kind of conservative dog whistle for being bossy or exclusionary. But he persisted. He wasn't political about it. He just wanted to create a small pocket of reality where common values like looking after shared property and being reliable could transcend all the different backgrounds and politics in the neighborhood.
Arthur's a fascinating figure because he completely disrupts the spectrum we started with. He's not a radical. He doesn't want to burn the neighborhood down. But he's not quite a reactionary either, even though he talks about standards. He's attempting something deeply sociological.
So how do we place him?
To understand Arthur, we have to look at the concepts of Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. These were developed by the German sociologist Ferdinand Tönnies way back in the 1880s.
Those are some heavy German words. Let's break them down for everyone.
Gemeinschaft translates roughly to community. This is the old world that Arthur remembers. It's organic, it's often family-based, it's rooted in shared traditions, mores, and unspoken understandings. It's what Durkheim called mechanical solidarity. In a Gemeinschaft, you don't need a written contract to borrow a lawnmower. You just ask your neighbor because you are bound by a deep web of mutual obligation. You are kin, or something close to it.
Okay, that's community. What about Gesellschaft?
Gesellschaft means society, or civil society. This is the modern world. It is mechanical, transactional, and based on explicit contracts. In a Gesellschaft, you don't rely on trust. You rely on the law, the police, the legal system. You are a collection of individuals living side by side, but you are fundamentally separate. You are strangers who happen to share a zip code.
So we've moved from one to the other.
Yes. Tönnies argued that as societies modernize, we inevitably move from community to society. And in that shift, we gain immense freedom. We aren't stifled by the village elders anymore, but we lose something crucial. We lose what another source calls synony.
Synony, that's a new term for me. It sounds like the direct opposite of anomie.
It is. The cryptologist Frida Adler coined it. Synony is a state of norm, conformity, and cohesion. She defined it as congruence of norms to the point of harmonious accommodation. It's when the external rules of society and your internal values match up perfectly. It's the feeling of fitting in, of things making sense.
So Arthur isn't trying to enforce a political agenda. He's trying to build a tiny pocket of synony in a world drowning in anomie.
That's it, exactly. And he's doing it through a tool library, which is such a practical, tangible, real thing. It's not a manifesto. It's a lawnmower.
Which brings us to the last concept here, structural functionalism.
Yes, this is the view that society is a complex system where the parts, the norms, the customs, the institutions must work together for the whole thing to remain stable. Arthur understands intuitively that you can't just legislate community. You can't just pass a law that says everyone be nice to each other. It doesn't work.
You have to build the structures for it.
You have to build structures that force interdependence. That's the key phrase. A tool library forces you to talk to your neighbor. It forces you to be trustworthy. It creates a microstructure of accountability. If I borrow your saw and I return it broken and don't say anything, I have violated the social contract. If I return it clean and sharp, I have built a tiny bridge of trust. Arthur is trying to weave a new Gemeinschaft inside the cold, impersonal shell of the modern Gesellschaft.
The split trap that was mentioned in the intro seems really relevant here. The reformer at the dinner party, she tries to fix society, Gesellschaft, with more bureaucracy, more rules, more committees, more policies.
She tries to fix a Gesellschaft problem with a Gesellschaft tool.
Right. And the radical wants to destroy it completely. The reactionary wants to magically return to the old community, Gemeinschaft, but usually a mythical, often exclusionary version of it. Arthur seems to be trying to build a new community from scratch.
That is the crucial difference. You can't go back. The golden age the reactionary dreams of is gone forever, if it ever existed. But you also can't live in the rotting corpse the radical sees, nor can you survive on the thin gruel of bureaucracy the reformer offers. Arthur represents a fourth option, the attempted cure. He is rebuilding organic ties from the ground up, not based on shared blood or religion, but on shared function and shared standards.
So let's bring this all back to our dinner party from the beginning. We had the radical, the reformer, and the reactionary all screaming at each other over a zoning law.
And now we can see them differently, can't we? They aren't just political enemies. They're all symptoms of the same underlying disease.
Let's try to synthesize the three stories. Elias, the librarian, he represents the Anomie. He is the pain of the void. The raw feeling of realizing that the old social glue is gone and we are alone in the empty reading room. He is the diagnosis of the illness.
Correct. Elias is the patient presenting with the classic symptoms. He's the pain we all feel.
Then we have Sarah, the architect. She represents the dysfunction. She's the story of the failed attempt to fill that void with therapy and validation instead of with objective standards. She shows us what happens when we try to solve a huge structural problem with a purely internal narcissistic solution.
Sarah is the failed treatment. She's the placebo that actually makes the patient weaker and the institution sicker.
And finally, Arthur. He represents the attempted cure. It's messy, it's small scale, it faces resistance, it might not even work in the long run. But it is a conscious attempt to rebuild organic ties, to build synomy, by establishing a shared reality through action, not just through words or feelings.
Arthur is the ultimate structural functionalist. He realizes that if we want to survive the collapse of the center, we have to build thousands of new small centers. We have to create physical spaces like his tool library, where the cognitive castes are forced to mix, where the rational elite and the passive consumer have to interact as equals over a broken hedge trimmer.
Because the hedge trimmer is real.
The hedge trimmer is real. It's part of a shared, tangible reality that the algorithm can't edit or filter away.
It forces us to reframe that dinner party entirely. The conflict wasn't just about a city policy. It was a clash between those embracing the chaos of the new informational world, the radical, those mourning the lost order of the old world, the reactionary, and those who are paralyzed by the collapse of the institutions that were supposed to mediate between them.
And that paralysis is where most of us live, isn't it? We are the reformers at the table, watching the fight, feeling the enemy, tempted by the easy answers of therapy speak, but ultimately looking for an Arthur to show us how to build something real.
So when we step back from all of this, we've covered Durkheim, Lasch, AI, tool libraries. It's a lot to process. But the thread that seems to run through everything is this fight over the nature of reality itself.
It is. I think that's the key takeaway. The real crisis isn't about left versus right policies anymore. It's about the fundamental architecture of reality. The sources suggest we are transitioning from a society of shared fate, what Durkheim called organic solidarity, to a collection of informational serfs living in private, algorithmically curated realities.
We're all retreating into our own digital castles, pulling up the drawbridges and letting the algorithms tell us what's happening outside.
And the final provocative thought these sources leave us with is not about who wins the next election. It's far more existential than that. It is whether society, as a single cohesive unit, is even possible anymore. Is it a concept that still has meaning? The common sense standards that once bound us, from the rules of an architecture firm to the unspoken norms of a neighborhood street, have been dissolved by the combined acids of narcissism, anomie, and algorithmic segmentation.
It's a heavy realization. It feels like we're all standing in the rubble of the center, and we have to decide whether to dig through it for survivors, burn the rest of it to the ground, or start patiently stacking new bricks. Arthur thinks we can stack bricks. Elias isn't so sure, and Saris is still looking for someone to validate her feelings about the rubble. The choice, I suppose, is which one of them we decide to emulate.
Indeed. And it starts by recognizing that the political spectrum we see on the news is just a map of our broken relationship to time. The real difficult work is in learning how to build the present together again.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. It's been quite a journey, from the rotting corpse through the golden age and ending up at the tool library. Thanks for unpacking it all with me.
It's always a pleasure to try and connect the dots.
And everyone listening, thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.